appreciate you all coming out tonight. For us, we have Judy Myers-Johns with us. She is from the Myers of the Cades Cove area. She was born in 1952. I hope you don't care me saying that. Okay, good. In Blount County and lived in Cades Cove. Her family moved to the mouth of the cove in '63 to have electricity. And she went on to work with the Great Smoky Mountain Natural History Association at the cable mill, selling candy and doing demonstrations. Traditional things like weaving on a loom, cooking on a wood stove, milking cows, helping with the moonshine mash, etc. She went on to work as a park ranger with the National Park Service with the Department of Energy and moved to South Carolina, then Cambridge, Massachusetts. After her husband passed in 2000, she returned to Tennessee working for the DOE, Department of Energy, at Y12. She retired after 20 years of chief of staff there and is now a security consultant with them. She has one daughter and one granddaughter. And besides her family, her passion is Cades Cove, the education of learning about the cove, preservation of the buildings, and the local history of the people who live there. And she has some ties to Cades Cove. She's the 7th generation down from John Oliver, Russell Gregory, and Robert Burchfield, and 6th generation from John Cable. She is involved in the Cades Cove, still going. She's an accomplished lady.
Yes.
She is involved in the Cades Cove Preservation Association, as is Richard Anderson. He is also a retired... And Stephen
and
too.
Larry.
And Larry. Oh my gosh. Is everybody Y12? No, gotcha.
Cades Cove.
Just Cades Cove. Richard is also a charter member of the Cades Cove Preservation Association and related to Cades Cove families also. Gregory, Burchfield, Myers, Olivers, Browns, and others. And after she is done with her part, he's going to talk a little bit about the Cades Cove Preservation Association also. So we start out with Miss Judy here.
So I got antsy when I knew that my cousins were coming. Because when I tell a story that's not quite right, I'll see them react. So I get a little off kilter. But because we're an intimate group, I would much prefer that if we have questions or somebody has something or somebody wants to add something to it, that we do that. This is the first time that we've jointly done a presentation. It's probably not good English. We haven't done one of these before. So we're going to give it a run through and go from there. But Richard is a cousin, and I have a sheet at the end I'll go back through. Stephen is of John Oliver family, and I'm the 6th generation from John Oliver, and he's 2nd or 3rd, but Stephen is the John Oliver type. And Larry, I'm related to through the Burchfield side of the family. So Larry is a 2nd cousin to me, and I was trying to look last night. No, you and Mama were first.
First cousin once removed.
That's
to
right.
you. Your mother and I are first cousins.
I know that. So
You
we're
and
second
I
cousins.
are
No.
once removed.
Your first cousins once
you,
removed. I don't understand.
You and my children are second
Larry
cousins.
and I are kin.
You're kin.
Yeah, kin. That's about as good as it's good to
I just
get.
got that
But I
explained
don't
to
know
me
why
a
it's
few
not
years ago
second
where I
cousin.
could understand it.
But I was trying to look last
It's
night
easy.
to see. I have double second cousins in the Cove, but he isn't one of those. And while the world believed it was incestuous, it was not. But so be it. So with that, Robert, there you go, Richard. Russell Gregory and Robert Burchfield were both in North Carolina at about the same time, and they married sisters. That was in the you can switch to Russell.
Then the daughters are sister cousins?
You went too far. Back one. There you go. So they married sisters, and both have ended up in Cades Cove. I think Robert was there before Russell was there, but they came to Cades Cove and brought their families there. So Russell has much more data in the system that I could find than Robert has. Russell was instrumental in an awful lot of the events for Cades Cove, and probably one of the more notable is that he was killed during the Civil War, and more than likely his son was the culprit who could recognize the sound of the gun and knew that it was his father's gun. and he was killed. And there are a couple of stories. He could have been dragged out of the son's house. He could have been going to the house, to the barn to keep him from killing the cow. But Russell Gregory is buried in Cades Cove, and he's buried at the Primitive Baptist Church, and there's a marker there that will say that he was killed as a Confederate soldier. And I'm probably going to repeat a lot, so switch to the next one and we'll go from there. This one is Robert Burchfield. And Cousin Larry first told me that this was not Robert, and I deleted it, so I went back today and put it in. It is the first time that I've seen a picture of Robert Burchfield. Robert, and I have the original deed. The Burchfields, forgive me, were hoarders before we knew what hoarding was, and I have an awful lot of the original documents. But I have the original deed where Robert bought 150 acres from Casper Cable. And there were 10 additional acres that had been set aside that were part of a blacksmith shop, and it might have been a Tipton. I have to go back and look. But he eventually, within a year or so, bought that additional 10 acres, so he ended up with 160 acres. And our grandfather Noah lived on that family property within a few months of it being in the family for 100 years. Next one, please. So the family says that Russell and Robert all came to Cades Cove following each other. And I've repeated, so you can switch next, Richard. So Russell lived outside of the park in Tennessee, and he lived in Tennessee up on Gregory's Ball for a while. They lived over near 20 Mile for a while, and they probably lived in North Carolina, Yancey County. Yancey, that's with a long draw. In North Carolina for a while, but even when they lived in Cades Cove, they had property which everybody would call the Russell Gregory house, or we knew that property. But when the park bought the land or condemned the land and then came back and paid, there were no deeds that Russell Gregory had. They'd never proved a deed anywhere, to include on Gregory's Ball, and he was part of a quad of men who bought 1,550 acres up there. But the family did the math. It wasn't financially beneficial to try to prove the deed. Next one, please. So there's the 1,550 acres. They tried, if you'll switch one more. Russell lived there for a while, and he lived, I think, that's why I'd like to see the LiDAR scan. I think he lived near Rich Gap and the Gant lot on the North Carolina side as you go down toward what's now commonly known as the Rye Patch. But he lived there with his family, maybe up to 3 years. It depends on which side of history that you listen to. But they tried to grow food there, or tried to grow crops. And the only thing that really did well was the rye. It was just a little bit lower, but the rye would do okay. They could do mostly root crops. And they ran cows, they ran sheep. And apparently they tried chickens, but didn't keep them cooped up enough. And the chickens didn't last as quick as they could bring them in. So he finally moved them down into the cove, I think, and then they built Parsons Branch Road, which tied them into the toll road, which went over to North Carolina off the turnpike.
1838.
I didn't screw up. Okay, one more. So the Gant lot was a place that we think the house that he lived in was near. And the Gant lot really was a place where they would herd the cattle, usually in the fall. They might put them there in the spring, but generally it was in the fall. They'd herd all the cattle into this lot until they could move them down as one herd of cattle. And we say Gant, and it really was Gaunt, because the cows would be there long enough that they would lose weight. But we called it the Gant lot, and it's still accepted on all the national parks. So they actually gave in and used one of our euphemisms. Russell was a member of the jury of View, which was where they built the road out Parsons Branch to 129. Russell and I don't remember how he hurt his hand, but Russell had a damage to his hand, and he wasn't able to join when the war started. The Civil War. So what he did was really became a big part of the home guard. And Mama would tell stories about up on Rich Mountainside, she had the horn. I probably have it somewhere. It was a cow's horn, and the kids would be up on Rich Mountain playing, and they would blow that horn if they saw somebody coming, but particularly if it was soldiers or the Confederate side. Most of us were Union, there were a few Confederates. They would blow the horn, but Russell was really the mover and the shaker for that home guard, as they called it. And he had, as I said earlier, he had this old rifle that his son was able to distinguish when it fired, that he knew what weapon it was, and that's what helped kill him, whether it was with his son or not in the group.
And there's the Gregory side of that story.
The Gregory side, that's the Russell Gregory. Okay, one more. So Robert and Elizabeth, and this is where I need them to help me because it gets a little bit confusing for me. So Robert was born in 1774 and he passed in 1816. He was 86 years of age. Elizabeth, I don't have a birth date on her. Larry may have in his research, but I don't have a birth date on Elizabeth. And she died in 1841. She and Robert married in 1805, and they had at least 10 children. So Mary Polly was the daughter of Russell Gregory. Mary Polly's aunt was married to Robert. When Elizabeth died, Robert began to court Mary Polly. She was 26 and he was 69, thereabout. They got married in January of 1843, and Robert's last child with Elizabeth was born in 1832. His last child with Mary Polly was born about 6 years before he died, and he was 86. Robert had in the neighborhood of 18 to 21 children. So the Burchfield side of it, he was 81 and had very young children, very young children. I don't know what you did.
No, it's not him.
Okay.
It's not him. You're fine. It'll go away.
Okay.
Yeah, in just a second.
Members of the Gregory family tell the story that Russell was so annoyed that his good friend and brother-in-law had proposed or had asked to marry Aunt Polly that he had what we call a fit. And he had issues that Mary Polly was actually his wife's niece. She was older than many of the stepchildren that she was about to become the stepmother for. And the story goes that Russell had another daughter that was married to Robert's son. So there was enough there that Russell was not happy that Robert wanted to marry into the family with Mary Polly. And if you believe all the stories, for 27 years he did not speak to his brother-in-law again. Not a single time. Didn't go to the services, didn't do anything if you listen to family history. You can go one more. So this I thought, because it's Sevierville, this was the postmaster in Sevierville, and I transcribed this note. I think his name was Philip Seaton. I think he was the postmaster, but he sent a letter to Robert Burchfield asking if his mailboy could spend the night there, and he would pay him to do that. Robert lived about a mile from the post office in Cades Cove, so the mailboy his name was Jason Howell. He might be someone here that you might know Seaton, but I just threw this one in there because it was a note to him, and this is one of many, many, many original notes and deeds and papers and letters that I have out of the Burchfield side of the family.
Was he the postmaster of Burchfield?
In Bakersville, North Carolina, he was until 1828.
I don't know that Robert was ever the postmaster in Cades Cove.
No,
Not
North
that I
Carolina.
remember.
Yeah.
So this is Mary Polly. As I said, Mary Polly was 26 when she married Robert, who was 69 years old. For Mary Polly to have been 26 and just getting married, I guess she was what we would have called an old maid. So Mary Polly was late in life at getting married at the age of 26. So this is where it gets really, you have to wrap your head around it. So her first cousins became her stepchildren. She was the grandmother to some of the, if you try to follow the line of how it gets really confusing. So her brother-in-law became her stepson. Her sister became her stepdaughter. You can follow the line. Okay, sorry.
Isn't there a country song about that?
Probably.
Cause I'm my old grandpa or something
Oh,
like
I
that.
don't know. I have to look that one up.
It's old.
I don't know. So Robert and Mary Polly lived
That's what I was
near the Burchfield house in Cades Cove. So to us, we all know where if I'm going to talk about Cades Cove, I can tell them Burchfield house, or I can tell them the Swanigers. We identify that way. So if you know where the Elijah Oliver cabin is, which is at the very end of Cades Cove, there's a lane there, and the house was sort of co-located to that and with the cemetery. So after Robert died, Mary Polly was sick for a while, and then she eventually became bedridden. But Noah and Sarah, their child, had lived about a quarter of a mile through the field at the most from them. And their house was large, but they had enough children that there wasn't room for Mary Polly in the house. So across Abrams Creek, as you go down toward Abrams Falls on that little knoll, was the Hawkins house, and it was just a little log house. They took that house apart, they moved it down by the Noah Burchfield house, so it was co-located, and Mary Polly lived in that house until she passed away with Noah. So Noah and Robert, Mary Polly died at the age of 83, and the math is a little bit hinky depending on which version you listen to, but she was about 83 years old when Mary Polly died. So Uncle Noah and Aunt Sarah is really where Richard, Larry, and I intersect. He intersected way up at the front because are you related to the Olivers?
No.
You related to the Olivers?
I'm married.
Okay, he and I are kin, blood kin. You're just
Yeah,
okay.
stained.
So Noah was born in 1849. He died in 1834. He married Sarah Jane Brown, which is Richard's side of the family. She was the granddaughter of Jesse Simeon Brown and Mary Proctor Brown, and they migrated from Ireland and were probably on the same ship, and they married when they came to Cades Cove. So Jesse's daughter was Sarah. Her brother was Henderson, which is where Richard comes into it. I get confused.
He was my
with those.
great-great-granddad.
He was his great-grandfather's, right. So I don't remember. Aunt Sarah died long before Larry and I were around, but my mother talked about Aunt Sarah, and she would talk about Aunt Sarah, that Aunt Sarah could read lips really prolifically. She had had mumps as a child, and she was more or less completely deaf. And Mama said that she was sitting at the table, and Mama didn't like buttermilk, and Aunt Sarah was pouring buttermilk, and Mama was yelling, "No, no, no," and kicking and screaming, and she got whipped over the buttermilk, and she had to drink the buttermilk. But it's the only story I remember about Aunt Sarah. Do you have any?
Yeah. She was blind, essentially blind the last year of her life, but she knew her way around and still
didn't
kept
know that.
house. Yeah.
Didn't know.
Your mother told me that. And she still kept house and everything. But Noah he's the son of Robert Burchfield and Polly. He's one of the 8 children. Yeah.
So just so that to understand the gravity of how large the family was. Jesse and Mary had 8 sons. Henderson was the third of those, and he was in the Civil War, and you have a picture of him in his uniform. You can switch. This is Richard Henderson Brown. I don't know much about him except that, do you know much about him?
Not a whole lot.
We know that he died in we think he died about 1890, and he was married to Sarah Elizabeth Hedrick, had 8 children, but they migrated between Wares Valley and Cades Cove, thus goes the Hedrick side of that. So I think they were in and out more than once, that they came and went out of Cades
Because
Cove.
Jesse the first, he shows up in 1850 census, but didn't show up 1860, but showed back up in 1870. So he had moved out into Wares Valley and then came back to the Cove.
One more. So I bought my granddaughter years ago, I don't know what I did with it, a pointer for the cat. But this is where Mary Polly's house was in Cades Cove. So if I okay, it's dead. So if I can point from here. So this was in the front yard. The Burchfield Cemetery is about here. The house, the Burchfield house, was down here, and you can sort of see a little bit. I think this is the Hawkins house there. So this tree I remember years and years and years, because we weren't ever allowed to cut it down. We weren't allowed to do anything with it. Mama would have had a fit. But I remember having to rake around it when we were raking hay or baling hay. But that tree was there. It probably went down about 8 years ago. There's a little bit of straggly wood still in the field, but it was not indigenous to Cades Cove. I think that it was, I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it wasn't indigenous, but it wasn't a cedar, but it was in the evergreen theory of some ilk. I think there was another one up near Larry's house going up to Gregory's cave. There was one in the yard of that house up there that was probably the same type tree. So that's all that's left of it. But I like that tree. Yeah. So this is Uncle Noah and Aunt Sarah, and this is Cades Cove Preservation. I didn't do that. I just think that this is one of the best pictures, and the park uses it quite a bit. But this picture to the right was one in several of a series that I'm not sure if the park was with them or if it was just the Knoxville News Sentinel, but there was a photographer there. So they took a great many pictures of them that day, and some were staged and some are a little annoying. If you'll go to the next one. So we'll get back to the pictures, but this is Uncle Noah, Aunt Sarah, and my grandfather, and Larry's grandfather is the one with the really long watch fob. That is John. I think there is one child in this picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's at least 3 more. Three more something. Okay. So this is the one that I just find absolutely annoying. This is the Hawkins house. So the house, the clapboard house sat just about right there, so it was just right beside it. But they asked them to come and stand there, asked him to take his hat off, per my mother, and they had that house in the background to intimate that that was where they lived, in this pitiful little house. We used it as a pig pen when I lived here. Go ahead, one more. So he built this, it was a 2-story house, and there's a picture coming up. For most of his life, he carried the same notebook, amazingly, the same little notebook in his pocket. And it would have in there where he salted cattle on Gregory Bald, or who owed him money for being up there with the cattle. And in there he had what my grandfather called a house plan. If you'll switch one more. So this was the house plan that he needed in order to build his house. It just tells them how many feet of lumber, and I'm not sure what the the bottom is, we think that J.R. Patty was the guy who milled the lumber, but I don't know what that one is at the bottom. I don't know if that was someone, but that was the house plan.
Look at his, look, they called him Noe. See how he spelled it?
That's how you
Yeah.
spelled it?
N-O-I-E.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know what that was.
That's
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Go one more, please. So this is the house that he built compared to what the park wanted you to, or the new, somebody depicted that they lived in the house. But this house, if you came in the front, you go down a long hallway to the kitchen here. The upstairs had as you get into the kitchen, the stairs went backwards behind you, and there were 3 bedrooms upstairs. I remember a few things about that house, but what I remember most is that we were upstairs, and Daddy and Mama heard something, and Daddy had Mama light the kerosene lamp and go down the steps first so he could see it. My mother quarreled about that for years and years and years, that she would have been killed first, but I remember them fighting over Mama having to go down the steps first. But I remember a few things about the house.
This is a good place for you to tell about what happened here with the money,
What?
their money.
Oh, you go ahead. It's sad.
They had 220 acres in 1934. When the park was assessing values of the land, they didn't wait until their land assessment came back. It actually came back at 11,000 something, but park offered them $9,000.
Okay.
So they sold out for $9,000, put the money in the bank, and banks went broke. So they were both in their 80s, and he died of anguish within a year. 2 years later, she died. But they didn't have money to go out to Maryville to buy a place, and they spent their last year not owning the land or the house they lived in, the last 2 years of their life.
And the next picture may be released, I'm not sure. This was the barn. I think this was a different day, but there are lots and lots of photographs. Larry's got several. We all have pictures, but this is Uncle Noah standing in front of the barn. I remember the barn. I remember after we didn't live in that house, but I remember a few things about that particular location. So this is the lease. You'll see, I'm sorry, this is where they paid him $9,000 for the land, and this is where they sold it. And then it was where they agreed to come back, and it was $1 a year for them to lease the land and stay there. Larry said he sold them 220. Whatever land he sold them, he leased back from the government substantially less than what was the original farm. And so he paid $1 a year for that. And then after, you can switch more, after he died, John had the lease, and this is the lease where John also had it for a year, and he lived in the same house. There was a substantial difference in the leases. The lease that Noah had didn't have the clause in the back that John's had that said they couldn't moonshine. So apparently somebody in the family was moonshining, and in the lease it prohibited them from moonshining.
As if Noah, he was the doorkeeper to Missionary Baptist Church. And so I don't think there's a danger of him moonshining.
Yeah. So this one was just really hard to read, and I need somebody to help me transcribe. But this is just after Robert had died, where Mary was petitioning the court to come to court to declare, or to settle his estate. But this is Mary Polly's handwritten note, and it was in March of 1861.
Okay.
This is John and Tennessee Tipton Burchfield. And Tenny, as we were called, had cancer, and I'm pretty sure it was breast cancer at some point in time. And I have a letter which I've lost, and Larry's got 2 pages of it I'm going to get back. But John was working in North Carolina when they were building Fontana or Topeka, one of the two. Calderwood. And he was over there, and Tenny wrote him a letter. It's just gut-wrenching. Her cancer had come back. It's just horrible. So she told him by letter that she was dying. It was just terrible.
And for that she asked him to come in that next weekend
Yeah.
if he could
Yeah.
and see her.
Yeah. She had, so after Teeny died, John was by himself and he lived in that big house, and you know, he's probably lonely. Well, my great grandmother on the other side was a widow, and she had 3 children, and John married her, much to the chagrin of part of the family, you know, but John was happy with it. But they had, go to one more, they had, well, go one more and then we'll go back. They had, this was my grandmother, Sis, as we called her, and this is Ollie, who was blind, and this one is her brother Fred, and I'm not sure who this young lady is, but Fred had cancer as well and killed himself at some point. But Ollie was blind, scared us to death. He had a lot of the mannerisms of some people who've lost their sight, where he was moving quite a bit. Scared us kids to death. Just, he scared, and he could hear unbelievable. We'd try to sneak by him and he'd reach out and say who's there. We just hated to go there, but it wasn't Ollie's fault. We were just afraid of Ollie. But you've got to say a lot for Grandpa John for taking a woman with a blind son who really, Ollie could be challenging.
And musical.
Oh yeah, he played an accordion. I've got his fiddle.
And organ at the Missionary Baptist Church. He played the organ while we
All
went to church.
Obviously by ear. He had, and I've got it too, a Braille Bible. He had Bibles made, and he had a postcard. I have to think that story through. He either sold Bibles or he sold postcards to pay for part of his music. But Grandma and Jonathan, Ollie's natural father, had the money, or the state helped them somehow, and they sent him to Nashville to a school for the blind. He had skills, he just didn't want to use them. He just. So if you'll back up, okay, so this is the lease where the Park Service sent it back to John, and it was for the $1 a year, and they had to pay for that. But if you look, it came from the Department of Interior, and I think this is the one where the Secretary of Interior actually signed it, or at least a facsimile thereof. Okay. This is the barn that I showed you a while ago. So this is my mother, my little sister Bonnie, and that's me picking my nose. We had lived, when Mom and Daddy got married, they moved into the house across the Missionary Baptist Church. And we always called a house by the location. So we called it at the foot of the mountain. So we lived at the foot of the mountain. My brother and I were born in the hospital and brought home there. And I remember there being chicken wire around the front porch so that Ricky couldn't get off the porch. And it was a fairly small house, and it happened to be the house that Sis, my great-grandmother, and her husband had originally built. He was a part-time preacher across the road at the Missionary Baptist Church, and he was one of the original photographers in Cades Cove. So a fair amount of photographs that exist were either through Jonathan or a couple of other photographers. But the Noah Burchfield house was larger, and I think that Daddy was farming their land because John was too old at that point to do much except be at home. So we switched houses. We just swapped houses. If one came vacant, we'd move into it. So we moved to Noah Burchfield house, and they moved back up to that house. So I told you how the house, the stairway, the lamp. I remember sitting on the kitchen counter looking out the window up toward the Burchfield Cemetery. And I was crying, and I saw Daddy coming. My older brother had a small tractor, and it had a diamond-shaped ruby glass that was a headlight on that tractor. And I'd swallowed it, and I thought they were going to cut me open to get that out. It scared me to death. So I remember milking the cows, and I remember rendering lard there in the backyard. I remember the fire. And the house that Mary Polly lived in, we had as part of the pig pen and then a chicken pen, but I wanted to be a lot like my brother. So my brother got to do everything, and he got to ring the pigs, so I wanted to ring the pigs too. So Daddy gave Ricky the ringer, I had the things that went in there to go in their nose, that piece of metal. So I'm standing in this sort of a little bit of manger, and the pigs were just below us, and my dad and my grandfather and my brother were down there. My dad grabbed one back leg, my grandfather grabbed the back leg, and that pig went to screaming. You know, that's their only defense. They just scream and scream and scream. Scared me. I threw the ringer and left. Didn't do any more pigging. That was all I could do. I remember seeing a wild hog in the garden that was out by the corn crib. Daddy had a baby bear in the tool shed one day, and we were scared to death that the Park Service was going to come and say that we'd killed the mother, and Daddy hauled that little bear off. We don't know if the mother ever found her or not, but we were afraid. I planted a bean. I had 3 little beans, and I saw the park ranger come, and they were about this big, and I pulled them up, petrified that G.I. Davis was going to get onto me for having beans. So after that, we moved up to the Gregory house, which is up by Tater Branch near the Missionary Baptist Church. And probably not long after we left the Gregory house, the Burchfield house, they burned it. We didn't have all of our stuff out of it yet, and they burned it. Part of it was we just left it. We didn't go back for it, but we had stuff. And we moved from the Gregory house up near the campground, and within a couple of days of when we moved, they burned the Gregory house as well.
Who burned it?
Do you remember? I'm sorry?
Who burned it?
National Park Service.
Park Service. So the Park Service basically were telling you what you couldn't do on that.
Oh.
Because of the...
Well, so one, they were trying to get everything established so that it all was depicting about an 1890, 1900 time frame.
Well,
so
were your brothers and stuff and all? Because there was a bunch of kids. Were they not working the farms?
I had 2 brothers and a sister.
Right.
Oh yeah, but Ricky was mean. But Ricky was just the older one of us. When we were younger, I remember working the horses. We didn't have a tractor. My grandfather may have had one, but we didn't own one. But I never remember being in Cades Cove using a tractor in the garden. We would clean, we cleaned Tater Branch, and we used Sam, George, and Silver were the 3 horses. We'd use them to snake logs, and so I remember using those horses more than I remember the tractor. But when we got old enough to help, yes, we helped. I mean, I spent many, many hours on a tractor, and we'd fight because Ricky got to rake and I didn't get to rake. So we were always fighting over who got to do something. My little sister, I was driving the wagon, tractor and wagon with hay on it, and my sister came to swap out because it was her turn. So I'm driving Bonnie was driving. It was my turn. So as Bonnie started to get off, she missed the fender and she hit that cog in the wheel, that big track. It pulled her down. It ran over her in a fetal position over her head. Didn't do anything to her at all. But my daddy and my mama, from that moment on, Bonnie saw God. Bonnie didn't do anything. I mean, if it came to milking or it came to cooking supper, Bonnie didn't have to do it because she saw God. But didn't hurt. It was a blessing. It did not hurt her. I remember in the Gregory house, my brother would be in the field, and I would have my younger brother and sister, and Mama would be in the field, and I would cook lunch for them. We called it dinner. I'd cook dinner, and when it got ready, I would take a white sheet out and hang it on we had a swing set, and I'd hang the white sheet out. That meant they could come and eat. And all I could cook, I'd stand in a chair at the wood stove and cook. And we'd have cornbread, green beans, corn off the cob, and fried okra. That was what I knew how to cook. But I learned to cook on that wood stove there. We didn't, it just was, we'd go to our grandmother's house for electricity, we didn't think about it that much. You lived in the Cove for 12 years without electricity as well. These 2 never spent a night in Cades Cove, and they had family there. Why they weren't there is beyond me.
It's all gone, Tom.
They're gone.
All right, I
Live in Townsend,
yeah.
in a modern house like that.
I think the next one is CCPA, but are there any questions? Did I gloss over anything? Larry's got stories. We all have stories. I've just babbled. Larry?
I'm gonna show him a picture. of
Oh,
Granddaddy
Grandpa.
Granddaddy John.
Talking about Ollie Myers. You're up there, grandfather. Early 50s. At the same time we were up there with Mr. Fox. came up. So we were driving around, and I think it was at the Becky Cable House. And I think that's where Ollie was, living there. It seemed like it was down near the mill somewhere.
Is it the John Burchfield house before you cross the creek?
And
Or no Burchfield?
and Mother and I were on the swing. His kids were hanging out there. All of a sudden, she jumps up and says, "Come on, kids, let's go for a walk." We walked down the mill race, you know. And when Grandpa was finished talking, we went on. And years later, she said, "Do you remember that?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, Ollie's hands started to wander."
So they could have lived it, he could have been at the Aunt Becky house because Becky was Grandma Sissy's aunt. So they could have been at Becky's house at that time.
This was in early 50s.
She wouldn't have been at Becky's house then.
I want to show him this picture. This is our Granddaddy John Burchfield. I'll walk around.
Okay.
You see he's taking grain to the mill,
Yeah.
and he's got a walking stick. Well, that walking stick he's got stuck on there. See it stuck down there in the stirrup? The neighbor, Mary Boring, that was a postmaster, a ways down the road, had a dog that would harass his horse. And so that was to frail that dog with when he came out after him. But, I lost it.
Oh, you can see it better. Yeah, okay.
He's going to mill. He's got his grain and sack.
Mama said that Grandpa was
See
getting
the
ready to go to
stick?
the mill that day. And she had a little Kodak camera. And she yelled, "Wait, wait, wait." And she ran and got the camera and took that picture.
Wow.
When you
Sir.
mentioned ringing the
Pigs.
hogs,
Yes.
that's putting a ring in the nose.
No.
Yes.
So why is it spelled W-R-I-N-G?
It's because I probably did it wrong. I don't
No, I
don't
was just
know.
wondering if that's
I
No,
don't
it's just
know.
R-I-N-G.
I don't know. How would
It's
you
just
have
a
spelled
ring
it?
in their nose.
yeah, but I'm just curious about the spelling.
It's like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I
not
don't. I
in
can't
that
answer
text.
Lot
that.
of
But I'll
tricks.
look it up. I'll look it up.
A lot of times
Okay.
the words were just spelled the way they thought it sounded.
Yeah.
Larry, anything else?
Yeah. I'll, to add to the Burchfield stuff here, my mother was John Burchfield's daughter, brother to her granddaddy, Vern. But anyway, I lost the point where it's going to where it's going to tell you now. But anyway, we my family came over there. Well, both of our family, our Tipton, you saw John Burchfield married Margaret Tennessee Tipton. She descends from Colonel John Tipton fighting Billy Tipton. Colonel John from the Revolution and his son fighting Billy from Revolution. Their house, Colonel John's home site's state historic site in Johnson City. But anyway, we all, the Tiptons got the floor of Cades Cove for their service in the Revolution. The son-in-law, Abraham Job, he got land over there because he married in to the Tipton family in North Carolina. So he got land over there. But anyway, some of them got land grants as early as the 1790s, and they couldn't execute it until the Calhoun Treaty came along of 1819 to push the Cherokee further south. The Calhoun Treaty of 1819 went down to the Hiawassee River, which opened up Cades Cove. So that was the first settlement. Then came Olivers out of Carter County. So our Tiptons were the first ones that owned the legal land grants there, if you count it back to the 1790s. But the Oliver family, John and Lorraine and little Polly came 1718 to 21, depending on who you talk to.
Well, it's 21.
21, okay.
Because,
They came,
My uncle found him up in Carter County.
they were still there?
He was summoned into court for debt.
Okay.
Back before 21, you know.
Okay, so as the park started filling up, our Burchfield and my Sparks all came by way of Maryland in mid 1662 or so. We were in Maryland, moved over to Frederick County. Ironically, the Burchfields were in Baltimore County and Frederick County. We all came down to North Carolina about 1760. Our Sparks went to the forks of Yadkin there around Wilkesboro. And the Burchfields came around the Linville River, around Burnsville and Bakersfield. That's why Robert ended up being the postmaster there, Bakersfield, until 1828. I expect that photo we have is when he was postmaster there, because photography wasn't big until probably the 1860s. He died in 1860. Somebody probably painted that picture. He probably stood before an artist for that. But anyway, I just had a little bit on how we got to Cades Cove. My family stayed until 1960. You all were there until the late 60s. Kermit Cawhorn was the very last one. When he died in 1999, they moved. I don't know how soon, but I heard you could hear the bulldozers coming toward to grade the house down before he was buried. You know, but anyway, they didn't waste any time knocking that house down, did they?
No.
And so they tried to make it as in a primitive community, but it was much more than that. And we worked hard to try to show that it was much more than primitive community. It was a vibrant community. I saw one picture you had at schools. We had at least 6 schools going there at one time. Mm-hmm. Then they consolidated the school. In 1915, they built a consolidated school right near the primitive church. And
It was 2-story and had a basketball gymnasium up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
but according to Dr. Randolph Shields, that ruined the baseball teams when they consolidated. They had huge baseball games from schools to school there, but when they built it all in one school, it's kind of like they didn't have nobody to play. Kind of like Blount County. We used to have great football teams, and then they built William Blount and Heritage, and they hadn't won a football game since. So anyway, that's just a little history on how we got into the Cove. And
So did the family ever get over that marriage, the feud between the two?
No, Robert
Never,
died,
they never-
and Russell didn't go to his funeral and didn't.
Nothing.
Russell may have been.
oh,
I'd have to go back and look, but no, they did not.
Wow.
No.
we're not mad about it though.
I think that Larry lived in Cades Cove 12 years. I'm 71, and I probably lived in Cades Cove between that and the campground when I was a park ranger. I would say 30, 35 years. I have to go count, but one way or the other. Sir,
Your Myers, did you go back to John and Jane Myers?
it depends on where did they live. That's the best.
Well,
way
they're
for me to
buried
do
in
it.
Townsend there by the.
Okay, so the Myers, there was a Townsend, there were brothers. Part of them stayed in Townsend, some went to Cades Cove. And we are distant cousins to those in Townsend, but not.
Peter
Now,
Myers.
Daniel Myers
Yeah.
is buried over in the
Yeah.
Primitive Baptist
Yeah.
Church.
Yeah.
That is one of John's sons.
Yeah, and
And then
Hamp and
his son was Thomas Richard Myers, who went to Pittman Center. Moved
we
up
said
to-
Mars.
when I'm sorry.
Mars, not
Mars,
Mars.
exactly. Yeah, and then I come off of that bunch that moved into Pittman Center.
So they're not to get way off track, but cousin Glenn and Joe Myers are caretakers of the Myers Cemetery in Townsend. So you might go online and look them up because they've got quite a bit of history on the Townsend side.
We've traced John back, or traced it all the way back to John, and he moves down with the Hedricks. He comes with his aunt Polly Hedrick into Townsend, and then his son Daniel goes over and marries two Cable girls.
Didn't they come from Greene County, maybe?
Yeah, they come out Horse Creek.
Horse Creek, yeah.
Horse Creek.
Well, the Myers came out of Pennsylvania, so we can go back further than that. But we have documentation for that came out of Pennsylvania. They're German.
Well, I figured there were. We've got here in Sevier County, we've got 3 sets of Myerses, and we did a book, your set, our set, and my set. And but I know that I worked it back, and can't remember the lady's name that done the book, The Connection. And she does the Burchfields, all that. But
Tennessee Connections.
Oh,
Tennessee Connections.
No, not Tennessee Connection, but The Connection.
Oh, okay.
Tennessee Connection was more about the wires and some of those.
Yeah.
But it's called The Connection. I can't remember. But the first chapter in the book is on the Myerses.
Yeah.
And but we've never been able to figure out who John Myers' parents are.
I would, Joe and Glenn, go on Facebook and connect with Glenn Myers.
Glenn Myers.
Glenn
Okay.
Myers, yeah.
But
So I have to say thank you for your service, sir.
One thing I want to tell you is we went on a campaign starting in 2014 when Sally Jewell came down and met with a bunch of us at the Heritage Center there in Townsend. So we started an initiative to get some boards put up in the cove. So we ended up getting 5 boards put up with photos and history of our bridging the gap between the pioneer days and the day they brought everybody out. So in front, I want to tell this one, in front of the Missionary Baptist Church, you'll see a board there with my mother, Amy Burchfield, being baptized in Abrams Creek at 14 years old. So it's on that board in front of the Missionary Church. But I'm proud of that. And the churches over there, the missionary, I know, as the season would go on and somebody would be saved and be going to be baptized, they held them till they'd get a group. So they'd have maybe 2 baptisms in one summer. And the baptismal hole was down there on the Burchfield, Robert Burchfield property. It's in the curve of the bend of the creek still down there at Abrams Creek. If you cross the bridge there on the west end, probably up 200 or 300 feet, there's a big bend there, and there's cornfield on the other side that belongs to Sam Sparks, but we've got pictures of baptismal with a cornfield in the background there. But it's still there.
I know we're running long. Can he do CCPA and then we'll?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go right ahead. Yep, you got a couple minutes.
Okay,
Go right
I'll
ahead.
just make it quick. There was a lot of interest. People were showing that former residents of the Cove, descendants, folks like you said, hey, we need a place where we can all come together and, chat and meet. A lot of artifacts, we need a place that we can put those. So in the late 90s, there was a lot of interest on that. So in January the 6th, 2001, we formed a nonprofit organization called Cades Cove Preservation Association. And we have continuously grown since then. We started out, we were staying and meeting in the Old Chilhowie School. Then we went to the Allen Wick School. Then our present building now, Blount County owns this building. This old house is over 225 years old, still standing its original foundation, original location. We have entered into a contract with Blount County, who owns it, And we now have control of this building. We put a new roof on it. We put new windows in it. We have been billed as the nation, well, actually the world's largest collection of Cades Cove artifacts. So this was the dream of a lot of people after they come out of the cove. We need something like that. And we have continuously grown until we're at that status now. We've got a great museum director, Gloria Motter. She's actually a certified genealogist from Ohio. So she really knows how to bring this all together. She does all their display and everything. But if you go to look for it, how many of you know where we are?
We know where it is.
Yeah.
We're just
Yeah, I
across and
think
down
we've
from the
seen it.
Blunt Memorial
When we
Hospital.
turn,
But
yeah.
so that's how we've grown from 2001 till now, and we're the world's largest collection of Cades Cove artifacts. And we're still free admission. We don't charge anybody anything. We're there Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 3. Other times if we need to be. Now, we got an event coming up, if you like crafts and things, on April the 26th and 27th. We will be having a crafts fair. And how this started in Townsend, they used to have a spring festival and a fall festival. Well, in somebody's infinite wisdom, they decided to do away with the spring festival and have a Bigfoot festival. But so we had vendors calling us because they knew we were kind of the anchor of that thing, had been for about 20 years. So they got calling us, what are you guys going to do? So Gloria says, hey guys, can we pull this off? Yeah. Richard, how many can you put on? I said, I can put 32 vendors on there. So we're coming up on our 3rd annual craft fair. And it's turned into a big thing. And
What hours is that like?
it'll be from about 10 till about 4
Okay.
on Friday and Saturday.
Friday and
We'll have
Saturday.
crafts, we'll have book signing, we'll have food, and food we don't go out and get this. Gloria's husband, Jim Motter, he is a chef extraordinaire, and he can make a hamburger just awesome, hot dogs. So he's got a little different idea this year. He's toying with the idea of maybe doing fried bologna sandwiches.
That's some good
So
stuff
you know,
right there.
we kind of keep it just like the folks would want it, you know. But we've got that, and then later on in the year, other things that we've done now. You go into the cove, you got those nice walkways into the 3 church cemeteries. When we first organized down near Russell Gregory's grave, that was about 16, 18 inches deep. Park broke the dirt in, brought the gravels in. We come up there with rakes, wheelbarrows, and shovels and manpower, and we built all 3 church pathways. The chain, we put that up not to keep people out of the cemetery, but to keep the masses in an established trail. We have people that goes up, teams that goes up every week, year round, weather permitting, sweeps out all 3 churches, cleans off the pulpit and the dusted seats, and pick up trash and everything. Other things we do, well, the old traditional decoration day in the Cove was the first Sunday in June. We still observe that. We go in on the day before and we'll put an artificial flower on every known grave in Cades Cove. Then on Sunday afternoon, we hold the old traditional decoration day service at 2:30 at the Missionary Baptist Church. Of course, then we got to go in the next Saturday and pick the flowers up so the park can mow. But that takes about all day. And let's see, Stephen, what time you get together? About 9:30 to start getting flowers out?
Yeah, about 9.
About 9:30,
Oh,
meet at
since they
the
don't close the
meet
coves
at
for
the
bicycles.
Primitive Baptist Church if you'd like to help put out flowers. But that's one of the things we do.
Where does your money, since you don't charge, does it come from donations and grants?
membership, and the sales of products.
Okay, so there's a membership that people can.
Membership.
This next slide.
Membership is only $20 a year.
Oh wow.
You get generally 2 newsletters, and they're not email. These are hard copies, so you can sit out in the yard and read them. But membership is free. I mean, it's $20. You can, well, now if you want a lifetime, that's $300 for a lifetime membership. So we have the two different kinds there.
There's a
Let's see.
YouTube video, and we don't have time for it, but if you just YouTube the museum, it's about a 7-minute video, and it's got a great deal of information to include a number of the artifacts.
Yeah, we've got some good stuff on YouTube. So
Voices of Cades Cove.
yeah, Forces of Cades Cove. That's a DVD that started like several years ago. Kate Marshall Graphics out of Alpharetta, Georgia, started video, and right now there's 9 volumes of that. Each volume has got 2 DVDs. You got approximately 2 hours, and these are people from the cove telling their stories. It's not the park telling their story. These are the people telling their story. We were watching it the other day, and so many that we were watching have since passed away. So it's
about 45.
about 45, yeah.
And they've won lots of,
Oh, yeah.
Kate's won lots of national awards
Yeah.
with those videos.
Oh, yeah. Kate has won all kinds of awards on those. But
Where can you get those?
you can get them at the Cades Cove
Preservation?
Museum.
Okay.
We've got it running a sale on right now, and we've got.
That's another way we raise revenue.
Okay.
I hope we still got them, but there for a while we were running a special package of 9 DVDs for $160. Normally they sell for $25 a piece,
Great.
and I mean that's for each volume. But it's a great thing. I mean, you get to see the people that lived in the cove telling their stories, and it's moving. And you look at it and say, I knew them, but now they've gone on.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Many of them, storytellers on there, have passed since you started that. When did it start? About 2010?
Somewhere around
Yeah.
2010, yeah.
14.
And yeah, we've lost to lots of those storytellers.
Yeah. So that's who we are, and come down to visit with us sometime.
Don't need an appointment, just 10 to 3, you're there those
10
4
to
days.
3.